start of The Lion on Mars, Chapter 3. Weeds. Do you really think it was an alien ship? Trey asked me. We were waiting in line for breakfast. I nodded. It glowed. Trey shook his head in amazement. He had thick, curly hair and bushy eyebrows, which Flossie had offered to pluck, but even she couldn't do anything about the pimples on his face. He had on his Stanford University sweatshirt. It was one of his favorites. People on Earth seemed to love sending us clothing from where they went to school. I was wearing a sweatshirt from a place called Dickinson College. It used to be Trey's. Most of my clothes were hand-me-downs from him. When I outgrew them, they'd probably be turned into a pillow or something. How fast was it going? He asked. Pretty fast, I said, and felt a rush of excitement because Trey was talking to me like he used to. Trey said, and picked up 2 doughy green buns from the serving platter. A lot of the food we ate was made from algae. I think I began, but Trey ignored me and walked away. The conversation was over. Disappointment pulled in my stomach, ruining my appetite. Are you going to stand there all day? Salty Bill asked me from behind the counter. Salty Bill was the first person Cy had recruited. Cy claimed that the cook was the most important person on a mission. Good food made for good moral. I stared at the doughy buns. What flavor are they? I asked. Cinnamon, Salty Bill said in a cranky voice. Salty Bill's resting state was cranky. I put a bun and a handful of freeze-dried plantains on my plate. Then I served myself a cup of algae tea, sweetened with honey, and headed to the oval table. The grown-ups usually sat on one end, and we sat at the other. Flossie, Vera, and Trey were already sitting at our end. Memes like to say the mess hall was the heart of the settlement because a lot happened here. On the side of the room, gray sheets hung on lines to dry. The mess hall was always warm because of the cooking, so it was a good place to dry laundry. There was a whiteboard on the wall where the grown-ups kept a list of what was broken. Right now the list was short: a broken motor in the algae farm, a light out in the communications room, and a clogged toilet in the kids' wing. Not my fault. Cy never let the list get longer than 10 items. Next to the whiteboard was a digi-monitor that usually displayed a live feed of the surface, but the surface camera was broken. Nobody seemed to know what had happened to it, and the monitor was turned off. I slid in onto a stool and took a bite of the bun. It was warm and chewy, just the way I liked it. Salty Bill might be cranky, but he sure could cook. Something rubbed against my ankle. I looked down. It was Leo. You are still hungry? I asked him. I knew Salty Bill had already fed him. Meow, meow, he said, which meant yes. I snuck him a piece of my bun. Across the table, Vera was wearing her favorite color, black. It was all she wore lately. Flossie and Vera was trying to be goth, which was an old Earth style. Flossie was something of an expert when it came to Earth customs, especially fashion and slang. What do you think of my new outfit? Flossie asked. I copied it from a digi-reel. It's 1970s style. Isn't it groovy? The outfit was like an environmental suit, except tighter fitting with a zipper up the back. It's nice, I told her. It's called a jumpsuit, Flossie told me. It took me forever to do the zipper. I don't know why you bother, Flossie. It's not like anyone is ever actually going to see it, Vera said. What do you mean? Flossie asked. Everyone can see it. I mean, anyone who's actually interesting, Vera said, rolling her eyes. Trey was staring across the room, where Cy and Albie were looking at a clipboard and talking. Why does he get to be Sai's apprentice? Trey asked with a scowl. Recently, Sai had begun taking on an apprentice and taught them about running the settlement. Last year, it had been Flossie. Sai had picked Albie a few weeks ago, and Trey had been unhappy ever since. Do you think it's because he's older than me? Trey asked. Flossie shook her head. I was the first apprentice, and I'm not the oldest. Trey frowned. Why did he pick you anyway? Probably because I have excellent taste in fashion, she declared with a grin. I think Sai chose Albie because he's so responsible, I said. Vera snorted. I guess I don't have to worry about Sai ever picking me. Vera didn't exactly have the best judgment. After all, she was the one who had thought it would be fun to prank Salty Bill by switching the labels on all his spices. He still hadn't forgiven her. It's so unfair, Trey muttered. I didn't understand why he cared. The grown-ups only talked about schedules and what needed to be fixed. We kids had way more fun. 3-word story, I said. Flossie gave a little clap. It was our favorite game. You made up a story and each person used 3 words. Trey always managed to get fart into the story. It was a real skill. I'll go first, I said. Once upon a time, an alien, Flossie continued, crashed on Mars, Vera said with a bored expression. It was Trey's turn, but he wasn't paying attention. Trey, I said, but he didn't say anything. Maybe he hadn't heard me? Trey, I said again, tapping his shoulder. He turned to me, his lips thin. It's your turn, I told him. This is a dumb game, Trey said. I just stared at him. That's 5 words. Across the room, Sai stood up, holding the digi-slate. He was wearing his command-issued blue uniform, as usual. He was the only one who ever wore his uniform. He said some habits were hard to break. Chore assignments, he called to us. Gather around. We crowded around him as he rattled off the chores. Flossie, kitchen. Vera, laundry. Trey, dust duty. Belle, algae farm. And Albie, you're shadowing me. Laundry? How thrilling, Vera said, rolling her eyes. I had nothing to complain about. I love the algae farm. But I could tell from the way Trey was standing, shoulders hunched, fingers curled, that he was not happy with his assignment. Dust duty again? That's the 2nd time this month, he fumed. We can trade, I suggested to Trey. I'll do dust duty. No trading, Sai said firmly. Why can't I apprentice like Albie? Trey demanded. Because you're not ready, Sai said. I am so. You're not ready until I say you're ready, Sai said, his voice firm. Trey looked like he was going to say something, but he turned and stomped out of the mess hall without a backward glance. A blast of warm air hit me when I walked through the doorway to the algae farm, Leo padding behind me. The sharp scent of algae tickled my nose. This was my favorite place in the settlement. It was green, and everywhere you looked, something was growing. But mostly, I loved it because of Phineas. When the Mars settlement mission was announced, Sai said he received over 10,000 applications. But when it came time to choose the crew, he threw out the resumes and went looking himself. He said he needed people who were problem solvers, people who were used to messy work in difficult conditions, like plumbers and electricians and farmers. Sai said that was who kept a settlement running. Phineas was one of those people. He'd been a farmer in New California. I made my way through the maze of the farm to Phineas's office. All around the room were massive containers of live algae. The algae was grown in batches depending on what it was used for: food, fuel, medicine, oil, paper, even soap. The algae also created the oxygen we breathe. Phineas was sitting at his messy desk, fast asleep. He slept a lot of these days, usually after meals. "Hi, Phineas," I said. He blinked his watery blue eyes open, looking confused. "Belle," he said, putting on his glasses. "I must have dozed off." He looked at the notebook in front of him and closed it. Leo leapt onto the desk and started nibbling on a leafy plant. It was catnip. Phineas grew it just for Leo. "There's that old lion," Phineas said, observing Leo. "He's getting fat. You need to stop feeding him scraps." "He's always hungry," I said. "What's a lion?" "It's a very large cat," he explained. "How large?" He rubbed his chin. "Oh, I don't know exactly. About 3 meters long, I suppose." "That's huge! Bigger than Albie. So why do you call Leo that?" I asked. "He's not very big." "It's his attitude. He acts like a lion. He's fearless," he said, shuffling papers on his desk. On the corner of the desk was a jar of cookies. Phineas claimed he got hungry when he was working, but I suspected he kept them for us kids. "Can I have a cookie?" "Didn't you just have breakfast?" he asked. "I'm still hungry," I told him, which was the truth. "You're just like the cat," he said. "Fearless?" "Always hungry," he said. "What are we doing today?" I asked him. "Shampoo, I think," he said. Phineas made shampoo from algae. It smelled nice, but it gave your hair a bit of a green tinge. "Might as well get started," he said, standing up and grasping his cane. He walked back to the main area, past the hydroponic setup where Phineas raised lettuce and herbs. He also had a tub of soil from Earth. I liked the texture of Earth soil, the crumbly softness of it. "What are you growing?" I asked him. Fuzzy green shots poked out of the soil. "Summer squash," he said. "Skoskies," I said. Phineas chuckled. "I don't think I've ever get tired of hearing you say that." Soxies was my very own slang for great. When I was little, I hated wearing socks. To encourage me, the grown-ups would give me a piece of candy every time I put on a sock. After a while, I would put on a sock, walk up to them, and announce "Soxies," just to get candy. In my head, Soxies meant great, because candy was great. It just sort of stuck. Tell me, he asked with a probing look. "How are you feeling after this morning's excitement?" That must have been quite a shock. "Okay, I guess. I don't agree with Sai," he told me. "Me neither. It was definitely an alien ship." Phineas shook his head. "Not about that. It was most likely a meteorite." "Oh," I said. That was disappointing. "I meant about the French settlement," he explained. "We should have contacted them to make sure they were okay, but we're not allowed. They're the enemy. That's what everyone says," I said. "Just because everyone says something doesn't mean it is true," he told me somberly. "What?" I asked. "On Earth, I had a large garden where I grew vegetables. Sometimes there would be weeds," he said. "What's a weed?" "It's a plant that just starts growing. If you don't pull the weeds out, they can take over a garden. They crowd out the vegetables, kill them until there's nothing but weeds." Killer plants? Earth sounds creepy. The point is, you have to take care of your garden. Make sure there are no weeds. Do you understand? I shook my head. I didn't understand. "Are there killer weeds on Mars?" I asked. "Oh, Belle," he said, shaking his head. "What am I going to do with you? Let me have a cookie?" He sighed. Tune in soon for the next chapter.